YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with some more NFL offseason content. Today we're going through the AFC West teams. I'm going to see what players these teams could cut, maybe who we can expect for them to cut, who they can't cut, and how that affects their cap space situation. Basically, what to expect going into this offseason surrounding that. We can take a look at some restructures, too. It's almost impossible to predict who will be restructured. We could see what teams could do there. And we're going to be talking a lot more about the cap space and restructures and things like that when it happens on our Twitter. So it's an absolute must follow there. Link in the description, comments for anything that you need. Decided app where you can win Amazon gift cards, anything. Well, we got full NFL coverage here. For this series, we went division by division, so AFC West today and NFC West later today. And then all the other divisions are already up, so this is it here. But a lot more content on the way. Hopefully you can join us for that. More NFL content than anybody out there. There's our Twitter. Again, a must follow. Always talking football here. Anything going on, giving you my takeaways. You hear stuff on the Twitter before you hear it on the channel, so I think it's a must follow. This website, we are using Spotrac.com. I'll pin a link in the comments there, but you can just go to it. Pretty simple. Pretty cool website. They got a ballpark estimate of the cap space right now, and they got all the cap hits listed for each player. But yeah, this is kind of with the projected 175 million cap space, which I think could be a little higher than that, but it has come down this year because of the COVID situation. But so this is kind of worst case scenario number for the Chargers going into the offseason. It could be a little more in this before cuts, maybe 5 to 10, might be pushing it more, but that kind of applies to every team. Now the Chargers, I mean, that's a pretty good number. That's a pretty good number, for a team that's, on the rise. And I mean, looking at the disaster some of these other teams are in, they're in the negative or close, a lot of teams. So it's a pretty good situation. You would like to clear a little more space. Do they have that ability to do so here? And they don't have too many options to cut, which sometimes is a bad thing because you want to clear space. But, in this case, I think it's a good thing because these are good players, good contracts given out, and they have a decent amount of cap space. But, I mean, you go down the list. I mean, there are some guys, even though they kind of feel like a young team, mainly because of Justin Herbert, but in some pieces they have. But, there's some guys that are up there in age. Casey Hayward, I mean, they're not going to cut him, but just to give you an idea, if they do cut a guy like that, $9.7 million. But I think he's just too important to this team, one of the better corners in football still. I think it'd be very important for Brandon Staley's defense, and that goes along with Chris Harris, 32 years old, but still a really good corner. I mean, just to see, 7.5, same thing there. Linval Joseph, big goon. Love me some big goon. Their nose tackle, 33 years old, has some injury concerns, some minor injuries pop up. But it's going to be a key piece to their defense this year, but they could save a lot with him as well. But I just don't, those guys, just because they're up there in age, they're going to be a key piece to this defense. So I don't see that. Mike Williams is an interesting one because they got Keenan Allen, they got some young receivers that stepped up, and Mike Williams kind of disappears at times, but he's one of the better contested catch receivers. I think it's a good piece to have with Justin Herbert. But at the trade deadline, I did talk about, maybe could they trade this guy to kind of clear that, get ready for the future. He's only got one more year. And I didn't really expect it to happen, but I thought that name, it's a possibility. So maybe they can look. We'll circle back to that if they look to trade him because they like some of these other guys like Guyton, that can step up, play receiver as well. Hopefully Derwin James stays healthy because that's a damn good safety. Looking forward to some of these pieces with Brandon Staley's scheme, like Jerry Tillery and Kenneth Murray. I think they fit. And Nwosu. But yeah, once you get down here, they're young guys, so they don't have too many ways to clear space. We'll have an alternative way here in a second as well. But I mean, they're probably going to cut some of these guys, cheaper options, just to bring in some more undrafted guys, to take their spot, not necessarily because they need to, they don't really need to clear that space, but that's a possibility there. But we see how cheap some of these guys. I mean, KJ Hill got some reps. Yeah, like we said, Guyton looked pretty damn good. I mean, they can cut guys like Storm Norton that they don't really need on their practice squad, save a little bit of money. Let's go up to the top. And before we trade Mike Williams, I'm not, just kind of an idea. I'm not saying it's going to happen or that should happen. But since I didn't really have any moves and the Chargers might not have any moves, let's take a look at this Joey Bosa guy. Let's see if we can restructure. It's a big cap hit. Let's see if we can restructure. Obviously, he's not going to take a pay cut. Not a guy that you would even ask to take a pay cut. Big-time player. But can we restructure this deal here if we need to clear a little more space, if we want to re-sign Hunter Henry, And they got to retool the offensive line. They got some free agents there, but they can let some of those guys walk. And, they need another pass rusher probably. So do they want to be able to clear space so they have extra after they re-sign Hunter Henry if they want to do that? So how do we restructure this deal? You see his base salary is $13.75 million this year. The cap hit is a pretty big number for Joey Bosa. So, and we could talk more about how I do this, on Twitter in the future. I can make some future videos of saying which big name guys I think could restructure and how much, because it gets really, you could see my notes here. I did all this. You probably can't even see it. I did all this math on how to restructure. I basically went in myself and manually restructured some contracts, and I did one with Joey Bosa here. And you basically take this base salary and you drop it down to the league minimum, veterans minimum, which would be around $1.5 million for Joey Bosa. But then you're saying you're really going to subtract that much. Like Joey, he's taking a pay cut. No, he's not taking a pay cut. You take that difference, 13.75 minus 1.5, and you add it into signing bonuses. And then you spread that out through his contract. So 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. So Bosa, I ended up, so the cap hit, it gets confusing, but the cap hit goes, and this is a ballpark number. This is just my calculations. So we kind of go back to what his cap hit is. It's that 20.7. And the number I came up with a restructure without a pay cut is 12.35. So we'll just call it, because that's a ballpark number. We'll call it 12.75. So you see, we changed his cap hit, and he's not taking a pay cut. He'll still get that money. Especially a guy like that. I think he'd be confident, in that, okay with it. So we actually saved $8 million just by restructuring a contract. And this is what teams will do this offseason. Now, the Chargers aren't a team that absolutely have to do it because, as you can tell, basically the downside of this is you are, you're creating more of a cap hit in the future. Obviously, you're kind of spreading that out and taking a lot of, but you can keep doing it really. So you could save $8 million. And my estimations around that number, you can save just by restructuring. So we cleared a little bit of money there. And Mike Williams, maybe they want to trade him because they like some of the other guys and they don't want this big cap hit. But again, it's not a team that desperately needs to clear cap. But if you trade, we'll see what happens if you cut him. They're not going to cut him, but just see the difference. It's going to be the same number. I already know that. That's a pretty big number. $15.6 million. Would you pay Mike Williams that if he was a free agent today? Probably not. So it might be tough to trade him. It might actually be tough to trade him. So, yeah, that's interesting because that's a lot of money. He would probably get. Yeah, I'm not too far off, but I don't think he would get that much. But if that happens, as you can see, you can really get a good amount. That's a lot of cap. That's kind of in normal years. That's kind of a lot. You're definitely on the better side of the NFL, but for like this year, if the cap does drop, which I expect it to because the COVID lack of ticket sales, that's a pretty big number. It's not Jaguars number, but it's pretty big there. So that's pretty interesting. Again, those restructures, I didn't go through every single team throughout this series. I did it with some of these teams just because I don't have a lot of guys to cut, but we can do more of that on Twitter, and then we can make a video out of it, just what big name guys can we see this happen to and how much money it would save. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's very confusing, but we can get rid of this, and then we can move on to the Chiefs. The Chiefs have negative 18.7, which is not good, but almost expected because the guys that they're paying, and they're in the Super Bowl right now as we speak. So it ends up kind of working out because you do this to reach your goal, and they hit that goal last year, and they're in the Super Bowl this year. So we'll see. They got a couple guys maybe they can cut. Hitchens still plays a ton, linebacker, but does a guy like Willie Gay Jr. or Dorian O'Daniel step up, So they could cut him, but is it worth it with $2.2 million? That's kind of the question because he plays quite a bit. And then you kind of go down. Damian Williams, he was big time in the Super Bowl last year, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be in his second year. Do they trust him with their other pieces? Is it necessary to keep around Damian Williams? Maybe not. Maybe they missed him. Maybe they want it back, but that's another $2.2 million. Alex Okafor, I believe, is a free agent. Yeah, they didn't remove him from there, so that's $0, so he's a free agent. Chad Henny, do you want to keep him at, 37 years old? I think you're probably better off drafting a guy because I think that backup's position's pretty important to, grow behind Mahomes, and that can turn into some pretty valuable in terms of a trade in the future. So that would be a very good idea in my opinion. So you cut Chad Henne, you save that 1.25. We're going down the list here. Yeah, these guys are pretty cheap. You cut some of these guys, that'll save, a lot of these guys are big pieces. Forgot, they got Lucas Niang coming back. That's a pretty good draft pick if he's healthy and on the field. That could be a future right there. You'll almost forget about things like that. You could cut, you can cut some of these guys to save a little bit of money, and they'll do that, and they'll bring in some other guys. So we're still at -11 though. That's kind of the problem. I'm thinking actually, now that I'm looking at Mitchell Schwartz, if I'm not mistaken, has one more year, and then he's a free agent in 2022. Yes. So they could extend him because he's a big piece of their team. He's getting up there in age, but he's so good. They could extend him and shift some of this year's money. What is the cap hit is at $10 million, so not a whole bunch to work with, but they can shift some of that money. Yeah, the base salary is not that much. A little bit of that money if they extend him around so they can clear more space this year. But they don't want to, because they're going to be in a little bit of a hole in the future. So I don't know if they really want to do that with too many guys. But I did, since we didn't have too much action here, I did go ahead and do it with Frank Clark, because Frank Clark has a pretty big cap hit this year. He has a cap hit of $25.8 million. So again, let's take that base salary, which is pretty big, $18.5 million. Let's drop it down to that minimum of $1.5 million roughly. So that's $17 million difference. So we got to pay Frank Clark back $17 million. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it in the form of signing bonuses on top of his current signing bonus, which is pretty big. And then we're going to divide that up over 21, 22, and 2023 and spread it out. And the number that I came up with was a cap hit of 16.1. So the cap hit of 25.8, and that's a ballpark number. The cap hit of, where is he, 25.8. I came up with, we'll just keep it 16.8 just in case I'm a little off there. 16.8. So restructure without taking a pay cut. You just spread around the money, and you're saving $9 million. It's a pretty big number there. So you're a little closer there. So we can't really expect, if they extend Mitchell Schwartz, they probably can drop this number down just a little bit. Not much. I sound like Tony Romo right now. Save $2 million. So they can do. And another one. Am I right here? 2022 free agent? Yes, sir. 14, 19. They can do this with Tyrann Mathieu too. But then if you do it with all these guys, you're creating, a pretty big cap hit over the next several years. And, that's when Mahomes' contract is probably giant. Chris Jones' contract is giant. They probably want to shift, if they do this, they probably want to shift a lot of it to next year, would be my recommendation. So they could potentially cut some with Tyrann Mathieu too. I just don't see them doing kind of all three. You could do it with Patrick Mahomes too. I just don't know if they touch that. So you can drop that down a little bit too, or probably quite a bit, to be honest, somewhere around there. I'm ballparking it now. So that's how you would get in the positive. It's tough to tell what the Chiefs are going to do, especially because, do they need to make splashes in free agency? Not really. They're the best team in football. We'll see if they end up the best after the Super Bowl, but if they don't, they're the second best. But at any given time, they could be the best. And they win off drafting. They found these guys through the draft, except for Frank Clark and Tyrann Mathieu, I guess. But they, hitting on a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then these small pieces guys, Juan Thornhill, Hardman, L'Jarius Sneed, they know how to draft these guys, so they're going to continue to build through that. So they don't really need to do these things and, create themselves a hole in the future, because what if teams are starting to figure them out, or teams are trying to match them in the future? Now you need to go make big moves, and we're going to lose some guys, so you want to save that money for the future there as well. So that's kind of the tough part, but they'll be fine. And looking at the Broncos, $12.58 million, which again, if you're in a positive by a decent amount, it's really a good thing, I'd say, because a lot of teams are in bad situations. But they got some free. Von Miller is a team option, actually, so we'll go over that in a little bit. He's a team option, so they'll take a cap hit because of that, and that kind of factors into this. But you look at Justin Simmons. I mean, huge, important piece, single high free safety. They let Kareem Jackson go up in the box, do his thing because of Justin Simmons. Alexander Johnson, A.J. Johnson is a big-time inside linebacker for them. You're kind of curious how much he'll cost. Maybe it won't cost a whole bunch, but he's a big-time player for them. Shelby Harris, guys like this, they want to pay. So, if they pay those guys, they'll probably be out of money. They may be in the negative. So then they want to be able to get better, though, at the same time. It's kind of a team that gets better by default, though, because some injured guys come back, like Von Miller, if they bring him back. We'll circle back to Von Miller. Here's a tough one. Juan James hasn't played much for them at all, and I think he's a good right tackle if he's on the field. They had Dotson fill in for him. He's a free agent as well. But people are probably had enough of Juan James just because we haven't seen a whole bunch of him at all. Can we cut him? No, we can't. -6. So that's pretty tough. And then you think pay cut. He hasn't lived the expectations. We're going to give him a pay cut. He has to agree to that. And he has leverage because they can't cut him because of that negative money. So I don't think he'll do that. We can come back and restructure him without a pay cut. So on the list, Jarrell Casey. Then they want to, they want to roll with him a little more. Remember, Shelby Harris is a free agent. They can play. They don't have to play the exact same position, but then they want to try him out a bit. AJ Bouye could be out here unless he takes a pay cut. Impossible to predict. $11.7 million. Pretty big number there. And I don't know if cornerback's really going to make or break this team this year if the rest is healthy. They were pretty damn weak at corner, but I think if you cut a guy like this and then kind of retool it with cheaper guys, I think you're better off. So we'll see if they do that. I would think about it there. And then you look at, none of these guys. Nick Van Nett probably. They got Albert O. And no offense to number one, he's a beast. $2.7 million. So yeah, we kind of could expect something like that. Driscoll's not a bad backup at all. But I think they'll probably bring somebody in to give Drew Lock some competition. Perhaps Drew Lock maybe the starter. We'll see. So then they'll probably have a better. They probably almost have like two guys that are maybe starters. Drew Lock, somebody else, so then they can move on from Jeff Driscoll for $2.5 million. Purcell, probably part of the rotation. They don't think they'll move on from him. And these guys are all cheap. You would say Freeman, but it's not much. And Lindsey's a free agent as well. Desean Hamilton, he doesn't get much action. How much do you save with that? It's still more expectations for him. We got a guy like Shelby Harris, a free agent, but you got a guy like Jarrell Casey coming back. Deshaun McTelvin, a game I liked a lot out of Arkansas. He's a lot of upside, so I wasn't surprised we didn't see much of him yet. He was kind of a raw prospect, a ton of upside. Arkansas kind of had him playing out of position, so he's got a Jordan Leggett you can move on from too. He's got a lot of, he can be good. Rippon they probably keep around. Yeah, guys like this. But if we want to, so there's not much you can do. These are kind of maybes, but you're up to $31.2 million. But I just went ahead. I kind of wish I did some of these in the other videos. Now we're on to the last day of these, but we could circle back, talk about it on Twitter, restructures, and make a video in the future. But Juan James, since, he probably won't take a pay cut, and, I probably can't, maybe you could trade him. You can't cut him. So you take what I've been doing with the other teams. You take this base salary, you drop it down to 1.5, you pay him the difference in signing bonus, you divide it up over and they do have a potential out here. So it's really only essentially a one more deal. So do you want to risk it, and do this with a guy like Juwan James? That's kind of the question, because you're going to have more of a cap hit in the future, but it might be worth it now because you do want to re-sign those big-time players and then make a splash in free agency. So maybe you got to do it, but the cap hit was what, $13 million? And for my calculations, my restructure, which is ballpark number, I came up with 7.5 cap hit with a restructure on Juwan James. So instead of 13, but ignore that. 7. It's really hard to see on here. 7.5. So we changed it from 13 to 7.5, ballpark number again. So you save $5.5 million by restructuring that deal, and you can do it with multiple guys. Some teams will, some teams won't. Some teams will do it with one guy. Some teams will do it with 5 guys. The Saints, teams like that. Packers maybe. Packers got some guys they can extend, kind of going off topic here, extend and do that at the same time. So you see the Broncos might be in okay shape. They do have to reset. Similar situation to the Buccaneers. Like the Buccaneers for a pretty good roster, even though the Buccaneers we know is better than the Broncos. Broncos got a pretty damn good roster. They were just hurt this year in question at quarterback still. So pretty good number, but then, similar to the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers got the good number and they have big-time free agents they need to re-sign, so that brings the number down, and you also want to get better each offseason, so you don't really want to stay the same. So there's a possibility they can stay the same, but you'll be happy if they get their big guys back. But couldn't do, as you could see, can make some more room, and then they can make some splashes. To the Raiders. The Raiders, I didn't restructure anybody because they got the Raiders. This video is made for the Raiders. This series is made for the Raiders. Mainly looking at cuts. Negative $21 million. It's one of the worst in the league, right? Yeah, it's terrible. Take a look at. They got to cut Tyrell Williams, in my opinion. That saves $11.6 million. He hasn't been playing much for them. I hated the signing at the time. You can find one of these receivers late in the draft for way cheaper. It's the same type of receiver. Lamarcus Joyner has been extremely disappointing. They could keep him to continue playing the slot, but he hasn't been playing well. You can save $8.7. You can find a slot player in the middle of the draft, even if it's the third round, for way cheaper than that, and it's probably better, to be honest. There's been some talk about, Gabe Jackson's an interesting one. It felt like the last year or so they want to replace Gabe Jackson. I don't know, and I always thought he was pretty solid, but, I think they could keep him. But let's just see anyways, 9.6, but put him back. Then you go, but you see there's another option there. Richie Incognito, very good, but what is he, 38 years old? Cut him. 5. So one of him and Gabe Jackson I could see going 5.4. Back up to Trent Brown. Trent Brown's a very good right tackle. When he's on the field, the Raiders are better. When the Raiders' offensive line is fully healthy, they're one of the very best, maybe the best, top 3 offensive line in football. But a lot of these guys, you can't really trust to be on the field. And when they're off, they're really, I don't want to say nowhere near, kind of close to that as good. But there's a lot of mess offensive lines in football, so they're still well above average even with beat up. So if they view, let's just see. All right, well, let's just get what I'm getting to. If you could save $14 million, do you want to keep this guy around that might be on the field 100% of the time for $14 million? And when you can remember, they were at negative 21 million. Now they're at 18. And that we have We didn't cut Gabe Jackson yet or anything. I think one of those guys probably keep Gabe Jackson. Richard, 3.5. They don't really need him anymore. Jeff Heath, we're going to come back to Jeff Heath saves 3.1. Yes, do it. These guys are pretty cheap. We're going to go back up to, they're going to keep around Kyle Sloter. I don't, probably not. Probably bring in some undrafted guy. We're going to go up to Trent Brown. Maybe they could still keep him around. They're still in the positive. $12.3 million because he's very good. He's very good. He's going to be on the field. We can trade him. Can we trade Trent Brown? Definitely can. Somebody will give you something. And you save that $14 million and you get a pick back. Marcus Mariota is a pretty interesting one. You can see his cap hit there, but let's bring up his contract. And so 2020 he got paid under $10 million. So that's a good amount of money for a backup, a good backup. But it's nothing ridiculous. But this year, it's a lot more. So this is a lot of money. This is all a lot of money for a backup. Again, he's a good backup. He was kind of useful, but showed he could still play. But do you keep, especially when you need to clear more space, do you keep that around? Probably not. They were pretty smart with this, I think. We'll see how it plays out. But they signed him, I think, to trade him. I think they signed him a 2-year deal and made more of the money in the second year. The first year, and they kind of lucked out that he got to go in the game and look pretty good and show that he can run, Gruden's West Coast offense, plus they mixed a little RPO. It kind of worked out perfectly. And so they put the money back here a little bit, and I think they made this to kind of trade him. So I think you can trade and see what happens if they cut him. You save that. And there's no dead cap there, too. So they did that perfect. They did it. They did it perfect unless, if he's on the roster as a backup this upcoming year, it's kind of going to look bad, and they weren't able to make splashes. It might. So they did it perfect, and they set it up ahead of time. But at the same time, there's a way where it kind of looks bad, if that makes sense. But I think you could trade him for a mid-round pick, and you save that full 10, no dead cap, that full 10-7. You get a pick, and just like that, ladies and gentlemen, the Raiders are up to $37 million. That's you don't see that too often, and it's very possible here. So a very bad situation made into a pretty good situation. You do, if you do, move on from Trent Brown, it's tough because it's a really good right tackle. If you trade him, it looks a little better. Nassib, I'm not a big Nassib guy. I was surprised by that. I mean, you can cut him too. You're starting to create a lot more holes, but you got $40 million. Las Vegas is an appealing spot. You got some draft picks out of it. You do, and the question comes up every offseason, Derek Carr, is he the guy for the future? I think he's their guy for now, but you always got to keep that in mind. You don't have Mariota anymore, so maybe try to find a guy in the draft, mid-rounds there. It could be useful to, if you gain a pick for Trent Brown, Mariota, you can use a pick. It doesn't have to be that exact pick, but you get my point. So, they'll probably keep a guy like Brandon Parker. He could fill in at guard, tackle. Just I'm thinking random stuff right now. So the $40.7 million, maybe all of this doesn't happen, but maybe the cap goes a little higher than they're projecting here, so it could be more than that. Maybe they can get some draft picks out of it, and they could restructure some contracts as well. Maybe Trent Brown is a restructure. Perhaps that would make sense, and that can clear space as well without, as you could, I did it for some other teams, without even losing him. So right now, the Raiders are in a bad situation, but it can very easily can become not only a good situation, a pretty damn good situation. So that's definitely a team to watch. That's a team that's what the series is for here. The teams like the Las Vegas Raiders here. So, we'll see what they end up doing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. This is probably my favorite one to do. I don't know why, but it's probably my favorite one, the AFC West. But we got the NFC West, and then all the divisions are done. We got all kinds of NFL content, free agency rankings, predictions, what teams should do. A lot on the channel, a lot more to come. In-season coverage, NFL draft coverage, Senior Bowl starts in less than an hour, so I got to hustle up here. We'll have you covered on Twitter. Make sure you follow that, subscribe, smash that like button. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.